Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that this House has considered the importance of Lesbian Visibility Week and believes that LGBTQIA+ women and non-binary people should be recognised for the work they do and the joy they bring. Lesbian Visibility Week was founded in 2019 by my good friend and publisher of Diva magazine, Linda Riley, and I'm delighted to welcome Linda to the House today. For the past 5 years, we have set aside this week in April to celebrate and uplift lesbians everywhere, from all backgrounds and all walks of life. And we are a community that grows stronger each and every year for it. 40 years ago this year, I took my mum to see the Rocky Horror Show, and at dinner I told her that I was a lesbian. I distinctly remember her response of, yeah, and of course she already knew. And as my colleague yesterday pointed out, if I was ever in the closet, then the closet must have made of glass. I was incredibly lucky to have friends and family to lean on when I faced and overcame the many barriers that most lesbians have to deal with. As sadly, it is still the case that for so many, this support is just not there. But that doesn't mean my journey was easy. Dealing with coming out, the stigma at the time, the people our community were losing and not talking about, the feeling of loneliness and isolation led me to move to Newcastle in 1989. And until I was elected to represent my wonderful Jarrow constituency in 2019, I barely came back to London. To see so many people this week celebrating and recognising Lesbian Visibility Week gives me hope that this and future generations of lesbians will be accepted. And that is thanks to those that came before us, paving the way. I hosted a reception in Parliament on Monday night in partnership with Diva magazine and the LGBT Foundation, which had an incredible turnout from activists, campaigning organisations, members of this House and members of the other House. And I'm so grateful that so many friends and colleagues joined us at our first ever parliamentary reception. I think it's the most lesbians that we've ever had in Parliament at any one time, Madam Deputy Speaker. At the event, we heard about the media narrative that lesbians are disappearing, but we're not. We are in our ascendancy, with more lesbians than ever. The number of women who identify as lesbian has increased by 64% since 2014. Instead of being erased, we are multiplying. As many of you will know, I've dedicated most of my political career to campaigning for LGBTQIA+ equality. My first political activism was campaigning against Section 28 and highlighting the damage that it did and continues to do to our community. From campaigning against Section 28 to stop LGBTQIA+ people from being forced to hide, to holding a debate on lesbian visibility is in the gayest parliament in the world is some feat and something that an 18-year-old me could never have imagined. However, I also couldn't imagine that 40 years later I'd still be challenging the same homophobic language, including comments about LGBTQIA+ people being a danger to children. And it has to be said that the slurs currently being thrown against the trans community and at me for being supportive of the trans community are a carbon copy of the hate that we faced in the 80s. I will give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Does my honourable friend agree with me, and she's making an incredible speech today, that hate is hate? And some of the hate that we hear in the rooms reminds me of the hate that my parents heard when they were being subjected to vile racist abuse. Hate is hate. Does my honourable friend agree with me?
I thank my honourable friend for her intervention. And yes, hate is hate and unacceptable in any form. And we defeated it then, and we will defeat this hate and discrimination now. But back to my coming out. Even with a supportive family, when I came out, lesbian was still a dirty word, a word thrown at me in school in a derogatory way. If you were a lesbian, you were seen as unnatural. You were chased out of girls' bathrooms, something that still has happened to me in recent years. And you were sexualised by men far older than you, something that lesbians still face today. It was 10 years after I came out that I bought the first copy of a magazine called Diva. There was nothing like it at the time. There was nothing for my generation that helped lesbians feel included, and that magazine helped me feel less alone. That was 30 years ago. So happy birthday, Diva, and thank you. In the last 30 years, Diva has been a lifeline for many women, and it was Diva and Linda Riley that launched Lesbian Visibility Week. Diva is much more than a magazine. As they tell us, they are a movement. Diva have an annual power list, and for the first time in 2024, I've made it. So from that young, lonely lesbian 30 years ago buying my first copy to being included on that list has made me feel honoured and deeply grateful. It's a privilege to be named alongside colleagues and other brilliant activists, including the honourable members from Livingstone, Nottingham East and Paisley and Renfrewshire South. Today I feel proud to see so many LGBTQIA+ women basking in the freedom to explore their sexuality in ways many women couldn't only a few years ago.
Would the honourable member give way?
I will.
I thank the honourable member for giving way, and she's reminded me of a thought that I had and something I felt very strongly at the time of the same-sex marriage bill going through. I had a young daughter, and I felt that if I had two daughters, and one was straight and one was a lesbian, I would want them to have the same quality of life, the same protection of the law, and the same right to love whoever they wanted. Does the honourable lady feel that we have made progress towards the situation that that would now be the case?
I thank the honourable lady for her comments, her remarks. And unfortunately, I would have to say that we've gone backwards in recent times. I thought that we would be further forward than we are if I, look back some years ago, but I'm afraid that isn't the case. Weeks like this really matter. They show solidarity, they enable us to support each other and help us to celebrate our differences, embracing the whole LGBTQIA+ community. Too often, people seek to divide us, but as the theme of this Lesbian Visibility Week shows, we are unified, not uniform. We are here to be fabulous in our differences and to be seen, to let others know they can be their true selves. We have to use our own experiences to help people and use our platforms to give LGBTQIA+ people spaces. And that's what Lesbian Visibility Week is about, and that is why I'm holding this debate. It's an often used expression that we stand on the shoulders of giants, but we do. And I want to honour just a few of the wonderful women who have given so much to our community and have been inspirational to me and so many others. In the 1970s, Maureen Cahoon made history by becoming the first openly out lesbian in Parliament. Her courageous act in the face of media hostility has meant that so many of us today can stand in this chamber and follow in her footsteps. My colleague and good friend, the Honourable Member for Wallasey, is an iconic lesbian in Parliament. The first to come out in office, now a dame of course. She's a role model to many, breaking down barriers as the first lesbian minister and always fighting for equality, using her platform to stand up for our community. Of course, there are always brilliant women who are the driving force behind so many political and campaigning movements. Lisa Power, one of the founding members of Stonewall in 1989, like me, a volunteer at Lesbian and Gay Switchboard, Lisa has led a decade-long fight on behalf of people living with HIV. Women like the brilliant Sue Sanders, founder of LGBT+ History Month, And from the other house, the Baroness Barker, who led the first ever debate in the other place on lesbian, bisexual and transgender women's health, to historic queer trailblazers like Anne Lister and the fabulous representation of her by Saran Jones in Gentleman Jack. I was distraught when I found out Gentleman Jack would not be returning for a third season. For the first time, I really saw someone on TV who represented me. In fact, so much so that I was even told we looked alike. To which I responded, I wish. But I do love wearing a waistcoat. The wonderful Sophie Wald, a trailblazer for LGBTQIA plus rights. As an actress and model, Sophie Wald was one of the first high-profile women to come out as a lesbian in 1997. And the brilliant Phil Opoku, a wonderful campaigner and founder of UK Black Pride. Dame Kelly Holmes, a sports hero to us all, an icon who was instrumental in the fight to address the vile mistreatment of LGBTQIA plus veterans, as well as those still in the army, and now empowering women with her Athena Effect events. And of course, Linda Riley, one of my best friends, the founder of Lesbian Visibility Week and publisher of Diva magazine, a titan who has done so much for lesbians and who I know will do so much more in her lifetime. And not forgetting another good friend, Nancy Kelly, who's also here today. Nancy has recently been appointed the director of Lesbian Visibility Week. She's already been a trailblazer as chief executive of Stonewall and an award-winning human rights and social justice campaigner, a champion of LGBTQIA plus rights who always stands up for our community. So I'm excited to see what bigger and brighter things for Lesbian Visibility Week are next in the years to come. Whilst there's a lot to celebrate, Madam Deputy Speaker, it's important that we don't forget the challenges that lesbians still face. In fact, just this week, in celebrating Lesbian Visibility Week, I have faced some awful homophobic remarks on social media, simply for being open about my sexuality. I've been called a nonce, had threats on Twitter or X, and I receive a constant barrage of homophobic abuse. But homophobic abuse won't stop me from standing here or speaking up on behalf of my community. This toxic culture on social media and the toxic narrative at times from the government pushing their war on woke makes LGBTQIA plus people less safe. We've seen a rise in hate crime, and we must make active efforts to support our non-binary and trans community who still face unique day-to-day challenges for simply being themselves and loving who they love. Last October, I held a debate calling on the government to remove the additional financial burdens for same-sex couples who need to access IVF. In that debate, the Minister committed to a timetable to remove these barriers and bring forward a statutory instrument to end the postcode lottery for same-sex couples seeking IVF. So where is it? This legislation has still not materialised. Before qualifying for IVF on the NHS, same-sex female couples must fund 6 cycles of artificial insemination. And it comes as no surprise then that too often people are being priced out of starting a family. My constituents, Holly and Leanne, have had to choose between buying a house or having a baby. A decision couples should not ever be forced to make. They've been unable to afford IVF and are now, like so many, looking at alternative routes. And we need to see action. Many cannot wait any longer. Today we are told that young people are too woke, that it's fine for young LGBTQIA plus people when they come out. Yet the reality is often very different. When LGBTQIA plus children are twice as likely to be bullied, when young LGBTQIA+ people are still made homeless and kicked out when they come out, and when people do not feel safe where they live. The Albert Kennedy Trust reported that 77% of LGBTQ+ young people gave family rejection, abuse, or being asked to leave home as a cause for their homelessness. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm coming towards the end of my remarks. The Diva survey in 2024 showed that less than a third of LBQ+ women and trans people in the UK feel safe where they live. To have this continue today is dystopian. Just yesterday, I asked the Deputy Prime Minister about IVF provision and pointed out that LGBTQIA+ community are being let down. His response was that the government have been excellent, that none of the lesbians, but I can tell you that none of the lesbians that I've spoken to so far this week think the government is excellent at anything. We must use our platforms and our ability to speak up, to highlight our diversity, to look at the impact of intersectionality, how the world is for lesbians of colour, for lesbians with disabilities, how the gender health gap and gender pay gap negatively impacts us all, but also impacts us differently, and also how privileged I am to be able to stand up in Parliament and say all this. Because in a third of countries across the world, including 64 UN member states, it's illegal to be LGBTQIA+. Until we have won equality for all people globally, then the fight goes on. Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I wish everyone a happy and safe Lesbian Visibility Week.
Yeah.